God's shown himself real in mine and my wife's life, over the 27 years we've been married in a lot of different ways. But one of the biggest ways was before we even had any of our kids. Back in '95, I was working for a medical supply company where one of my jobs was delivering liquid oxygen to nursing homes and individual residents and so forth. And I had gotten a call to make a quick delivery that I'd never been to before. And the accounts that I'm sharing with you, I don't know really firsthand, in the sense that I had a closed head injury due to the accident, to where a lot of it was just had to be relayed to me, and through the facts that they had from the police report and the scene, and then everything that happened in the hospital, I've been able to put it together. But as you can see, that was the liquid oxygen truck that I was driving. It was a box van, to where the cab of the truck sat on top of the engine, so there was really no nose to the front of the truck. And supposedly, as I was going over this hill in South Dallas and Cockrell Hill, and trying to read a map, as I was going, because I didn't know where I was going, as I was going over the hill, evidently the guy that I hit, he was at a stoplight, and he noticed that I was evidently going to be going way too fast to be able for him to get out of the way. So he actually just jumped out of his truck. And I had probably 300 to 400 pounds of liquid oxygen in my truck, and I hit a butane truck. And liquid oxygen and any petroleum product don't have a good reaction when they mix together. Fortunately, I had prepared my truck to where I was meeting all the hazmat requirements, and so had he. So there was no breaches in any of the tanks. But it took 3 different jaws of life to get me out of the cab of the truck, because I was so pinned in. And my wife wants to share.
So I think from this point it might help for me to give a little context. I'm going to do the best I can, because I'm not really a good sharer. I'm a good joker, but that's about it. So Matthew was working, as he said, for a medical supply company, and they were a large company, and so someone was able to see the number on the side of the van and called the company to let them know one of their drivers had been in a real serious car accident. And they immediately turned on apparently they had access to like the paramedic scanners and everything, so they could kind of hear what was going on. And at the scene, Matthew wasn't breathing, he didn't have a pulse, so they called him dead on arrival. And they just left him in his van. And there was a guy that had been recently saved. He had had a dramatic conversion, and he didn't know that you don't call out to the Lord for a miracle. I mean, he really wasn't limited by, unfortunately, church experience. And they started calling out to all of their drivers, and Matthew didn't answer. And Andrew just felt like the Lord quickened in his heart to call life, and started just crying out to the Lord, "Matthew, wake up. Matthew, speak." And they had lots of paramedics there. They were trying to control the area, shut down the location. And it was about 20 minutes, and about the time that Andrew found out and was just really praying and believing for Matthew, that they heard him make a sound. And so they went over to the truck and started working on him. They had to call in another Jaws of Life from another city, and he was, because the company was kind of listening to what was happening, they had called him in as an amputee at the scene, because they couldn't free his left arm, and it was already pretty badly damaged. And so they called him into Parkland as an amputee, and I understand one of the other paramedics said, "He's okay, he's stable, and so we're going to work a little bit harder." They freed his left arm and decided to make a change and send him down to Baylor in Dallas, because they had a better brain trauma center. Are you wanting the mic back? So I was a little hard to get a hold of that day. My dad and I went down to the hospital, because they had finally called me, and they said they're putting Matt in a helicopter and they're flying him to Dallas. And I asked, "Is he alive?" And they just said, "We really don't know." And so when we got to the hospital, I went to the restroom, and you don't really have a concept of what a bad wreck is if you haven't really been through one. And so I went to the restroom and I went up to the front and I was like, hey, I just thought I'd let, the front desk know I was there. And they said, we've got a private room for your family. There's already people gathering, chaplains there. And I was like, wow, that doesn't really sound real good. So after a little bit, they let my dad and I go see Matt. And he was, already the brain swelling and everything. He was kind of starting into a coma at that point. But I remember going back to ER. And they had his left hand like totally wrapped up, and he was kind of trying to respond, and he...
Just real quickly, the injuries that I had is I had a compound fracture in my left wrist to where, the bones break through, and the steering wheel basically had kind of collapsed on itself because I held it too hard. I crushed most of the bones in my right foot, between the base of my toes all the way up to my ankle. So I had metal all put in there, and then I also fractured my left femur and dislocated my knee as well. So that might make more context to what she's about to share.
So he had actually broken every bone in his body from his hips down on one side or the other or both, and they had a little problem recovering his knees, and his right arm or left arm was all messed up and things. So anyway, when I got back to ER, he kind of started to move his hand, and the nurse rushed over real quick and said, "Don't move that hand, or it's going to fall off on the floor." It was that bad. So anyway, we got back into the room with the family, and a surgeon came in, and he said, I don't do too many of these because I'm really good, and they don't usually call me. And I thought, wow, that's really conceited of him to say that. But, if you kind of reinterpret that through the Lord, he was saying, you're really blessed that I am here. He's a guy who does, he goes with the Professional Bull Riding Association and kind of repairs those guys. He's often out on the arena floor. We still see him on TV. But he said, all I'm going to do today is I'm going to try to work on his knees, and I've got to stabilize his femur, and I'm going to do the best I can with his hand and foot, and then we're going to bring in other specialists to come and work on Matt. So anyway, it was a long journey, and his first surgery, I was expecting him to look a little bit better, but there was just lots of pins and lots of scaffolding trying to hold him in place, and they had we just happened to have the best foot surgeon in the nation in Dallas, and because they didn't know if they were going to save his right foot. They had to do a lot of opening up just to even get good blood supply to it, and it was kind of a different journey. Our friends were buying houses, having babies, taking trips, and we were hanging out in the hospital, and spent the next couple of years, multiple surgeries, and I got to drive a wheelchair for a long time with him in it. And God even kind of prepared us for that season, even though we didn't know. He kind of called us to get out of debt, so we paid off all of our student loans, paid off our car. Then I wanted to buy a car because we'd shared one for 3 or 4 years, and I bought it from a friend whose daughter was a quadriplegic, and she bought it specifically for a wheelchair, and it was the best station wagon. Don't ask me why I was enamored with station wagons at the time, but it was just God kind of always preparing us and just getting us ready for that season in our lives, and I was just really thankful for that. And even his last surgery was just a few months before our first child was born, before Levi was born, and it just really blessed my heart that the Lord finally had him out of his cast the week before our son was born, so that he could stand up next to me during the birth. It seems like a small thing, but that was really important to me and something that was heavy on my heart. And this might be the only time that I cry during this whole thing, and I'll give the mic back to Matt in a minute, but we're not really very special. Everybody has miracles. Everybody has whether you recognize it or not, in the big and the small. But we're just average Joes. There's nothing really special about us or anything fancy or exciting that we do. But we did, after all of this, we felt very called to foster ministry. And I know that God preserved us in our marriage, because we were supposed to be Santana and Starla and Judah's mom. You guys were going to go into foster care, and God saved your dad so that we could be the family that we were supposed to be, and that we were going to be there for you. So
I was in the hospital for over a month, just in recovery and rehab, and you don't know why things happen the way they do, and I still have some lingering effects that have changed the way I do things that wouldn't have happened, before the accident, but I'm just kind of reminds me of God's, faithfulness, and that I'm here to have a sore foot, or I'm here to maybe not be able to do certain things that I used to do, and I'm thankful that God, saw after me, as Rhonda was saying, that, they had left me for dead, but yet, they wanted to contain any possible explosions, and then when Andrew, said, "Wake him up, God," that's when they heard me moan, and, God works in the ways that he does for reasons that he does, and, he's, as Rhonda was saying, weren't doing anything extra special to warrant such favor. It's God's favor. And he did it because he loves us, and we're sharing it with you to bring glory to him, not to us. It's nothing we asked for or deserved. He did it because out of his love and compassion for us. And there's probably a lot more we could share, but, I'm just thankful that God's hand was on us, because I shouldn't have made it through it.